changed just a little bit here. You'll notice in South America that Uruguay is the newest country to now have access to the Starlink satellite service. Here's a quick fact sheet about the Starlink satellites. There are 23 on board. The image in the middle is what they look like in their launch configuration. Each of them clocks in at about 1,760 pounds, or about 800 kilograms. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet, or 30 meters. They use argon hull thrusters for in-orbit maneuvers. They were built in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle. And they'll be deployed at 200 miles or 320 kilometers in altitude at a 43-degree inclination. Launch timeline now. Here's the sequence of events that we're expecting once the Falcon 9 rocket leaves the pad, carrying the 23 Starlink satellites up to low Earth orbit. Currently, SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff at 10:13 p.m. Eastern, 0213 UTC. T plus 1 minute and 12 seconds, the vehicle will pass through max Q, or the point of the greatest aerodynamic pressure that the vehicle will experience on ascent. That's followed by a few different events in rapid succession. First, at T plus 2 minutes and 26 seconds will be first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO. That's followed 4 seconds later by stage separation, and then second stage engine ignition, or SES1, at T plus 2 minutes and 36 seconds. The payload fairings will be jettisoned just a little after the 3-minute mark. And then at T plus 6 minutes and 10 seconds, the first stage entry burn will begin. That burn lasting 23 seconds in total, setting up for a landing burn to begin at T plus 8 minutes and 2 seconds. The booster, tail number 1067, is expected to touch down on the drone ship a short fall of gravitas at T plus 8 minutes and 24 seconds. The Merlin vacuum engine on the Falcon 9 second stage will cease its first firing at T plus 8 minutes and 40 seconds. Then it'll go into parking orbit, or coast phase, which will last until T plus 54 minutes and 11 seconds, at which point there will be a brief 1-second burn, setting up for a Starlink satellite deployment at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 20 seconds. Refresh of what we're expecting for this fueling timeline for SpaceX and its Falcon 9 rocket. The T-minus 38-minute mark coming up in just a couple of minutes here. That's the point where SpaceX will make the call on the start of propellant load. And if they are ready to proceed, we'll start with RP1 loading at the T-minus 35-minute mark into both the first and second stages of the vehicle. At the same time, liquid oxygen is loaded onto the first stage tanks of the Falcon 9 rocket. T-minus 16 minutes, second stage liquid oxygen load will begin. Before that happens, we'll see the so-called big vent from the strong back. It's quite a striking venting process. It happens as the feed lines are being chilled prior to that second stage LOX load. Big vent comes at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. T-minus 7 minutes, the Falcon 9 engine chill will begin. Small amount of liquid oxygen is flowed through the plumbing and the turbo pumps on the 9 Merlin engines, and it helps protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract, Starts with the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it will clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9 with a much more rapid pullback motion. About 3 minutes out, LOX load on the first stage wraps up. T-minus 2 minutes. Falcon 9 is fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director will give their go for liftoff in T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines ignite and are healthy, the flight computer will give the command for the hold-down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a T0 liftoff, which again currently is targeting 10:13 p.m. Eastern. Majority of that is made up by the first stage, the bottom 2/3 of the Falcon 9. This particular booster has flown 18 times before, looking for its 19th flight tonight. Tail number 1067 in the SpaceX fleet. At the bottom of the first stage are the 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen and produce 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Again, tonight they're using a shortfall of gravitas, which is staged and waiting for this first stage booster after stage separation. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure which consists of an aluminum honeycomb core that is surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 rocket as it comes back through the atmosphere tail first, like a big old dart heading toward the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the Falcon 9's second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket is powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. There is also the slightly shorter version of that Merlin engine. That nozzle was featured earlier today on the launch of Maxar's 2 Worldview Legion satellites that lifted off from Vandenberg Space Force Base this afternoon. Second stage engine produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust. It'll be fired twice on today's flight to place the 23 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. The MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix, that being RP1 or rocket-grade kerosene, as well as liquid oxygen, same as the first stage. Following Starlink satellite deployment a little after an hour into the mission, this upper stage engine will ignite a third time as a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it will burn up, and that helps to eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this flight. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 rocket are the payload fairings. These are part of the rocket that encapsulate the 23 Starlink satellites. The fairings are made up of a carbon composite material. They stand 13.1 meters, or 43 feet tall, and they're 5.2 meters, or 17.1 feet in diameter. The two halves of the payload fairings will be recovered a little further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship, and they gently splash down under parachutes. Again, the vessel that's going to be scooping them up out of the Atlantic waters and bring them back into Port Canaveral is called Doug, named after Doug Hurley, currently now working for Northrop Grumman. But prior to that, he was a NASA astronaut and one of 2 who flew aboard the Demo 2 mission alongside Bob Behnken back in May of 2020. step back in time with us as we run down the pedigree of this particular first stage booster, which made its debut back on June 3rd, 2021. The launch of a cargo Dragon spacecraft. That was CRS-22, or Commercial Resupply Services 22. That mission sent up more than 7,300 pounds of science and supplies up to the International Space Station, along with a pair of rollout solar arrays. This flight was just the second mission under SpaceX's Commercial Resupply Services 2 contract with NASA. Next up for this booster was its first crewed mission. That was the flight of Crew 3, heading up to the ISS on November 11th, 2021. At one point, it looked like Crew 3 was going to be launching on Halloween, and there was a little bit of excitement around that, but poor weather happened to kick things back out to November 11th. The third launch of 1076 came on December 19th, 2021. That was the launch of the Turksat 5B satellite. Flew for a fourth time on April 27th, 2022, supporting another crew mission. This time, it was the Crew 4 flight. That mission included NASA astronaut Jessica Watkins, who became the first black woman to serve a long-duration mission in space. This was also the debut of the fourth and so far newest Crew Dragon spacecraft, dubbed Freedom. SpaceX said it plans to debut a new Dragon spacecraft sometime this year. And since we know that will not be on the Polaris Dawn mission, as it is being specially outfitted to support that mission's unique flight profile, odds are we may see the new Dragon make its debut, if it is ready, for the Crew 9 flight, set for the end of summer. The Crew 4 mission was also the last time that a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft launched to the International Space Station without a Russian cosmonaut. Next flight of this booster came on July 14th, 2022. It was another cargo Dragon mission. This time it was CRS-25, sending up more than 5,800 pounds of science and supplies to the ISS. Flight number 6 was the first Starlink mission for this booster. It was Starlink Group 4-34 on September 19th, 2022, lifting off from the same pad, Pad 40, landing back on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Launch number 7 was for the geostationary satellite Hotbird 13G for Eutelsat, launching on November 3rd of 2022. This booster's final launch of that year came on December 16th with the launch of SES's O3B mPOWER 1 and 2 satellites. Missions 9 through 11, all Starlink flights. Those were Starlink 5-2 on January 26th, 5-5 on March 24th, and 5-9 on May 14th. 12th launch came on June 18th when it launched Satria, a communication satellite for Indonesian company PSN. Moving on, launches 13 through 16 were all Starlink flights. Those were Starlink 6-10 on August 17th, 6-22 on October 13th, 6-29 on November 22nd, and 6-35 January 7th, 2024. 17th launch came in support of the Telkomsat Maraputa 2 satellite, lifting off from Pad 40 again. This was on February 20th. And most recently, the 18th and previous flight was another Starlink satellite launch, Starlink 6-45. And between then and now will mark the fastest turnaround for this particular booster at just 33 days. We'll land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. It's got 2 of them based here in Florida, and the one on deck tonight is a short fall of gravitas. The fairing halves will be jettisoned just a little bit downrange of the map you see here on your screen as well. And SpaceX will use the recovery vessel called Doug to scoop them up out of the Atlantic waters and bring them back to Port Canaveral. If all goes well and we see a liftoff in just a little over 7 minutes, this will wrap up a very busy day for SpaceX. Not only did they launch the 2 Worldview Legion Earth-observing satellites for Maxar from Vandenberg Space Force Base, they also relocated a Dragon spacecraft earlier today. The Crew Dragon Endeavour, which brought the Crew 8 astronauts and cosmonaut up to the ISS. That was moved from the forward port to the space-facing port, or the zenith port, of the Harmony module. This is one of the last big items left to do before the station is ready to receive Boeing's Starliner spacecraft, set to launch at 10:34 p.m. Eastern on Monday, May 6th at the earliest. Lots to do to prepare for that mission, and we will have exceedingly robust live coverage here on our channel as well as on our website, spaceflightnow.com, in the run-up to the Crew 8 mission launch. Excuse me, in the run-up to the Starliner crew flight test launch. So if you're not already subscribed to Spaceflight Now, now is a great time to do so. When you do, be sure to hit the bell icon, turn on all notifications so that you're alerted whenever we post new videos and we start new live streams. Now T-minus 5 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. In about 30 seconds or so, SpaceX will begin the strong back retract sequence. That'll start with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. We're now starting to get pad views as well from SpaceX.
Thanks. Our press for strong back lower.
And we were receiving mission audio as well.
Strong back retract has started.
Good call out there. Again, you're going to be watching for those clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up. And just a slight lean back from that strong back. Those noises you're hearing are some of the pad fueling sounds. You see the clamp arms now open up. T-minus 3 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. As you can see, just a little bit of housekeeping here. The discrepancy in time between our countdown clock and what you see from SpaceX. Our countdown clock is in real time. What you're seeing from SpaceX is on a slight delay. So for those of you who are in the Central Florida area or in Southern Florida and want to watch this launch with your own eyes, you want to pay attention to the clock in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Coming up next, we'll hear a call out from SpaceX that the first stage liquid oxygen tank is fully loaded.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
You Hear that call out there. Now about 2.5 minutes before liftoff. Taking a look at the live chat, want to thank one of our wonderful channel members, SG, for being back with us again this evening. Good to see you one more time today, SG. Thanks for the super chat. And as we cruise into the final 2 minutes of the count, thanks to the 15,000 of you plus that are watching with us live. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button to allow more folks to find their way to this live coverage, as we are now less than 2 minutes to lift off of the Falcon 9 on the Starlink 6-55 mission tonight.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
With that call out, the Falcon 9 is now fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant. What you're seeing here on your screen are the ground gas closeouts, one of the last steps prior to liftoff. See some good angles on this here. This view from our friend Chuck Briggs.
Ground gas closeouts.
There you hear that call out from SpaceX for the ground gas closeouts. Coming up on a minute before flight. One of the next calls we should hear is the SpaceX launch director giving their go for launch.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
That'll be the next call that we hear.
LD, go for launch.
And with that, after a few delays tonight, we are now just 30 seconds away from the launch of the Falcon 9 rocket, sending 23 more Starlink satellites up to low Earth orbit. 20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 6-55 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. 23 more Starlink satellites now starting their journey up to low Earth orbit. 20 seconds into flight. Great tracking views. This from our friend Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions. Falcon 9 passing Mach 1, approaching. Here you see Max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Coming up, we'll see a few different events in fairly rapid succession. First will be main engine cutoff at T plus 2 minutes and 26 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation 4 seconds after that. And then second stage engine start, SES-1.
Impact chill has started.
That call you
Nominal trajectory.
That call for MVAC chill, they are thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine, preparing for its ignition. This view here from Chuck Briggs. And this from our own Adam Bernstein here at the press site. And a little over 2 minutes into flight. About 10 seconds until MECO. And there you see main engine cutoff, stage separation. And SES-1, second stage engine start.
Pico.
And a beautiful view of that.
Stage separation confirmed.
Impact startup.
There you see those events on a slight delay from the SpaceX feed. Coming up on the 3rd minute of flight. Fairing deployment imminent. There you see those payload fairings falling away and tracking view from Pete Carstens. Great angle here. A little bit of a
Fairing
jellyfish.
separation confirmed.
And there you see those Starlink satellites now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this mission. Now a little more than 3.5 minutes into flight. The next milestone we're coming upon is the first stage entry burn beginning. That's coming up at T plus 6 minutes and 10 seconds. You can see some stars cruising by as we continue to track the Falcon 9 second stage here. This view from our friend Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions. Now a little more than 4 minutes.
Both vehicles continue on a nominal trajectory.
A little more than 4 minutes into flight, and a good call up from SpaceX that both the first and the second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket continue to follow nominal trajectories. This launch marks the 330th Falcon 9 launch to date. We'll have some more info on the total mission stats, but thought I'd just go ahead and mark that one as we're now a little more than 5 minutes into flight, coming up on the start of the entry burn here. Now less than a minute away. Now about 20 seconds till the start of the entry burn. So far, it's been a nominal flight of the Falcon 9 rocket. You can see the start of the entry burn beginning here.
Stage 1 FTS has saved.
Great catch by both Pete Carstens and Adam Bernstein.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
This burn lasting just a little over 20 seconds, concluding in real time, and you can see the onboard camera view from SpaceX first stage.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Stage 2 FTS has saved. Nominal trajectory.
All good callouts from SpaceX. The flight termination system on the Falcon 9 for second stage has been saved, as you just heard. It is no longer needed at this stage of the flight. You can see that entry burn really slamming the brakes on the Falcon 9 first stage 1067 as it makes its way back down toward the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Coming back through the atmosphere, also providing some deceleration assistance as well. Now a little over 7.5 minutes into flight. Coming up at T plus 8 minutes and 2 seconds, the first stage landing burn will begin. Unfortunately, because of the distance
Stage 1 transonic.
of the Falcon 9 first stage, we won't be able to see that with our ground cameras, but fortunately we have these onboard camera views from SpaceX. So the time at the bottom of your screen you want to look for again is about 8:02, T plus 8 minutes and 2 seconds. That's when the landing burn will begin.
Terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Good start to the landing burn. We should see some drone ship views coming into focus on the right-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
And a good touchdown of the Falcon 9
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
first stage booster, 1067, for the 19th time, making a safe landing.
Impact shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And a good call out on the orbital insertion. The Falcon 9's upper stage will now go into that parking orbit until about T plus 54 minutes and 11 seconds, at which point there will be a brief 1-second burn, setting it for Starlink satellite deployment at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 20 seconds. With good liftoff and landing of the first stage booster, it's going to go ahead and bring things to just about a close for us. But before we go ahead and sign off for the night, we're going to go ahead and wrap up as we always do with a look at the mission stats as they currently stand. As we mentioned, this was the 19th flight of this Falcon 9 first stage booster, 1067, the 330th time that a Falcon 9 launch has occurred. This was SpaceX's 45th Falcon 9 launch of 2024, the 73rd Falcon booster reflight, of the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 46th launch of 2024, including the third integrated flight test of Starship, the 112th orbital launch in the last 365 days, the 183rd orbital launch from Pad 40, and the 238th overall orbital launch from this pad. Moving along to some recovery stats, this was the 67th landing of a booster on the drone ship, a short fall of Gravitas, the youngest in the SpaceX fleet. This was the 235th SpaceX drone ship landing, and the 303rd overall booster landing for SpaceX. Here's where our bar chart now stands. Finally, some global mission stats. This was the 33rd orbital launch from Florida on the year, the 48th from U.S. soil. This was the 52nd orbital launch of a U.S. rocket company, including the 4 that happened down in New Zealand with Rocket Lab. And this was the 83rd orbital launch from around the world. A couple of launch mishaps. Here's where the pie chart stands. The U.S. now capturing 63% of the orbital launch pie. China with 18 launches, although they are preparing for the launch of a Long March 5 rocket set to lift off early tomorrow morning on a lunar sample return mission that's set to collect samples from the far side of the moon.